Good morning. So I set a goal for myself back in May that I wasn't going to buy any more trees this year. So I failed. I bought a tree. And I'll show you the tree I bought. I bought this little beginning juniper tree at my local grocery store a couple minutes away. And you might be saying, why, of all the trees you could buy, why did you choose to buy this beginner bonsai juniper, procumbens juniper? There's so many other trees out there. Let me explain why. So these appeared at my grocery store a couple weeks ago, and I didn't think much of it. I walked by them. I said, "Oh, there's some junipers. I wonder how many of those are going to be alive in a year." And that got me thinking about a video idea, and I thought, I wonder if I could keep one of these trees alive. So I thought, I should do a video where I describe and explain what I'm going to do to keep this tree alive, because I think there's a real potential audience for that. And hopefully, if you are watching this, you are perhaps one of those people. You just received one of these perhaps as a gift, or you bought one yourself and you don't know what you're doing and you want to keep it alive. So this video is for you. I'm just going to give a few tips and explain what I'm going to do to keep this tree alive. Alright, so piece of advice number one is don't buy these trees. I paid an exorbitant price for this tree. I paid $28 for it. And a lot of what I think I was paying for is a styled tree. I think a much better, more satisfying thing to do in my mind, for me, is to buy not something that's pre-made, but to go to a local garden center, find something that appeals to you, and style it yourself. Because you could have bought, perhaps pre-bonsai stock, and created this yourself, doing all the pruning, because somebody's done a lot of the work already on this, and I think you're paying for that. So related to that is this tree, and I think this is just a theory, I don't know if this is true, and I don't think the creators, whoever's creating all these little bonsai, I don't think they have nefarious intentions and just take pleasure in people buying these trees and taking their money and then having them die on them. I don't think that's happening. This tree, I don't know when it was styled, but I suspect it was styled this year, maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago. It's recovering from that. And I think a lot of beginners perhaps don't realize that when they buy this tree, they're buying a tree that's not in full health and vigor. It's in recovery right now, probably. Was probably quite healthy, I think. It looks quite healthy, and that's one reason I did buy it. If it looked like it was going to die, it wasn't going to bother. It was worked on recently, and so it was taken out of a larger container, put in this small container. It had a lot more foliage on it, and they trimmed a lot of it off. So it's in probably recovery right now, and it needs to be treated as such. So I think a lot of beginners, you start with a tree that's already not in peak health and vigor. And that's what you get from a nursery garden plant often, is a tree that is vigorous, healthy, growing strongly. So piece of advice number two, transition this tree outside. I say transition intentionally as opposed to move, because it suggests that you make a gradual change to taking this from what's an indoor environment where it was to an outdoor environment. If you put this tree in full sun right now, its needles will burn. I know that because for the last 2 weeks this has been living in a grocery store in dim light, which is not adequate for it. And before that it was very likely in a similarly dark place. So it's not accustomed to bright sunlight, which is what it needs to thrive. Junipers like at least 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. That's the ideal. So what I'm going to do with this tree is gradually transition it to brighter and brighter light. So for the first few days to a week, I'm going to keep it in shade outside, which is still probably brighter than the grocery store light that it was in before. Then I'm going to after about a week, I'm going to place it in sun for about maybe 1 to 2 hours and then put it back in shade. After I do that for 2 days, the next 2 days I'm going to put it in sun for maybe 2 to 3 hours. And then after I do that for 2 or 3 days, then I'm going to place it in sun, or place it in a different spot where it'll get sunlight for maybe 3 to 4 hours. So it is kind of laborious. I'm going to be moving this tree a lot, so that it gets more and more light gradually over the course of 2 to 3 weeks. You might be thinking, I just anticipate like, well, I can't provide it with that sort of light in my situation. To which I'd say, try and grow it outdoors in shade. There are different degrees of shade, but if you really don't think it'll work or you're discouraged, I'd say, it's okay. Maybe juniper just is not the right species for your environment, and I think that's an important consideration to take when you're a beginner. Is what kind of environment do you have, and adapt what kind of trees you're going to grow based on what kind of care you can give. And there are trees that you can grow in shade outside. Immediately yew comes to mind, which I'll show that. And actually, it makes me realize I have a yew plant or tree that I bought as a garden center material and styled, and it cost actually about the same as this. And frankly, I think it's probably a better tree. But yew is a great one to grow in shade. But also, say you can't grow something outside, you just don't have outside space. There are trees you can grow inside. And I've seen people, if you have, I'll add this caveat, if you have the capacity or ability to provide it with a really bright grow light, basically the better, brighter grow light, the better your trees are going to grow indoors. But there are trees you can grow indoors year-round in temperate climates if you just don't have an outside space. So piece of advice number 3 is don't work on your tree. This goes back to my first point that I suspect this tree was recently styled and therefore is not ready for more work. It needs to recover for work, and that's generally what you do with bonsai. You work on a tree and then you leave it alone for several months at least. So I'm not going to prune this tree, I'm not going to wire this tree, I'm not going to repot this tree. So I'm going to let this grow and treat it as if it's in recovery and wait for it. I'm going to pay attention to it and look at it. I'm going to wait for it to start putting on growth, definitely, before I do anything to it. So piece of advice number 4, or really guidance on watering, and that's the big thing. You do need to provide this with water, obviously. So this is more watering 101. So one thing I like about plastic pots, which many of these are in plastic pots, is it's easier to use weight as an indication of when you should water a tree. When it starts to feel light, give it water. Another good indication is to just use your finger and go down a little bit, and when it gets dry, a centimeter, a half inch down, then you can water again. That's why it's hard on the internet. You don't get solid advice like, how often should I water it? Well, it really depends on when the tree needs it. You can't say it needs to be watered once a week. It needs to be watered once every 3 days. It's just hard to know in your situation. So you just need to learn, again, by weight. When it starts to feel light, water it. When the very top half inch of soil has dried out, water it. And one, final piece of advice is, if your tree dies, I hope you don't give up. I've killed so many trees. If you have questions, I'm very happy to answer your questions and give any advice I can give. So best of luck to you. I hope you enjoy your new Juniper bonsai.